The lobby of the convention center buzzed with noise, heels on marble, voices bouncing off glass, cameras clicking like bugs in a swarm. I walked in with my head up, but my stomach tight. Boulder never felt big until that morning. I could feel every eye, every lens, like they were waiting to measure if I was enough. In my hand, I held the crumpled outline of my speech. 3 minutes. Polished, concise, hopeful. I'd written it the night before, on the same desk where my first prototype came to life. My fingers grazed the thin bracelet on my wrist. It was old now, a little tarnished. Own your voice, engraved on the inside. Harlan gave it to me the day I defended my thesis. I thought it was a compliment. I didn't know it was a warning. The stage lights warmed my skin as they called my name. I stepped into that spotlight thinking it was finally mine. I didn't even make it to the podium. Sherwin, my father, rose from the front row and intercepted me halfway. He smiled like a politician, pulled me into a sideways hug that froze my breath, then took the mic. He didn't look at me, not once. "Thank you," he said to the crowd, "for recognizing the hard work of our family. This wasn't just one person's achievement. Our daughter, Delara," he gestured toward me, "will be sharing this honor with her sister, Rowena, who's been instrumental in shaping her journey." There it was. The applause was confused at first, then polite, then overwhelming. I stood there, still holding my note, and watched my own victory rerouted like a shipment gone to the wrong address. Rowena appeared on stage as if she'd been waiting just off-wing. Perfect makeup. That PR smile. She took my hand like we were best friends on a game show. Her grip was tight, rehearsed. The staff directed us off stage before I could say a word. Backstage was colder than the front, literally and otherwise. No one looked at me, just passed me. My assistant approached me slowly, like someone delivering bad news at a funeral. "They submitted the documents 2 weeks ago," she whispered, almost apologetically. I blinked. "What documents?" She handed me a printout. My name was at the bottom. The signature looked like mine, almost, a little too clean. The tail of the K didn't hook like I always did. It wasn't mine. I looked up toward the screen outside the green room. The live feed was showing Rowena waving. My name was in the caption, right next to hers. I felt my throat dry, my hands cold. My mind buzzed with the phrase I hadn't heard in years but never forgot. "Family first," Sherwin used to say, "doesn't mean you go first." I sat down. Then I stood again. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I pulled out my phone, tried calling Sherwin, voicemail. I opened Instagram. Rowena had already posted a photo of the two of us on stage, smiling. My face looked like I was holding my breath. The caption read, "Stronger together, #family win." I deleted my speech file. The documents didn't lie. Or rather, they did, but they were convincing. Sherwin had listed Rowena as a communications advisor, submitted the design as a team effort, and included a quote from me. "This win belongs to all of us." Except I never said that. Not like that. I remembered the interview they pulled it from. It was about open source innovation, not this. The coordinator handed me a folder, hesitant, like she was giving me something radioactive. Inside, official award submission, date stamped, signed, forged. I didn't cry, I turned the page. There was my pitch deck, but revised, stripped of context. My annotations were gone, replaced by clean formatting and Sherwin's logo. Then something slipped off my wrist. The bracelet. It hit the carpet with a dull sound. I bent down, picked it up. "Own your voice." I closed my fist around it. "You want war?" I whispered. "You'll get a revolution." I didn't leave my apartment that morning. I didn't need to. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree the moment the sun broke over the horizon. Headlines, tags, mentions. My name was everywhere, except it wasn't mine anymore. Maxwell Sisters. Family. Innovation. Rowena. And Delara. One headline stuck to me like a bruise. The public face behind the brains. Below it, a photo of Rowena in a white blazer, lips parted in mid-laugh, looking like she'd just saved the world. In the article, a quote was pinned to me, but rewritten. Stripped of its context, flipped upside down. Suddenly, I sounded like a proud co-conspirator in this charade. I hadn't even spoken to Rowena since the ceremony. Or Sherwin. It wasn't just that they took the credit, it was that they edited the story. And I'd seen that happen before. As a kid, I built a model turbine for the science fair. Rowena stood next to me smiling, and when the judge asked who came up with the concept, she said, "We both did." She was 11, I was 9. It started there. I turned off the news alerts and made myself coffee. I didn't drink it. Mid-morning, I clicked open a national text stream. I knew I shouldn't watch. I did anyway. There she was. Rowena sat across from a smiling host under studio lights. She wore a pearl necklace I'd once seen on my mother. Her hands were folded just right, like she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. She smiled when she spoke and paused like she was listening, but her words were empty. "Delara and I always dreamed of building something together," she said. "It was never about ego. It was about family." The host beamed. "You two are a shining example of what family in tech can look like." I wanted to throw my mug at the screen. The comment section was worse. "Love seeing women lift each other up. Sisterhood is power. More of this, please." I slammed the laptop shut. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear, from fury so still it almost felt like grief. I opened the family group chat, typed, "You need to fix this, immediately." No one responded. The chat showed 3 dots for a few seconds. Someone was typing. Then nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. An hour later, I saw Sherwin's latest post. A photo of the 3 of us from the awards night. The one where he held the mic, Rowena grinned, and I looked like someone trying not to disappear. The caption read, "Proud father, united daughters." The comment section was full of praise. Not one word from me. But my name was there. It was like watching someone put words in my mouth and frame it on the wall. I shut off my phone and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A former colleague messaged, "Congrats on the new lab. Sister Tech Labs looks amazing. Didn't know you were launching so soon." I sat up straight. What lab? I searched the name. The first result was a slick landing page. Midnight blue, animated text, sleek design. Sister Tech Labs, LLC. CEO, Rowena Klein. Mission, pioneering innovation rooted in the Maxwell family legacy. Inspiration, quote, "Innovation is a conversation, and family is the language." D. Whitlock. They used my words. From a private pitch deck I'd never published. They even lifted my initials for their logo design. I laughed. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was the kind you hear in courtrooms and behind locked bathroom doors. There wasn't a legal trail, not yet. But emotionally, they'd stolen the last piece I had, my voice. That night, I opened my inbox to more fallout. A tech magazine invited me for an interview, CC'd to Rowena. An investor who had once said my ideas were too ambitious now asked when the sisters would be taking pitches. A professor I admired sent me a message that read, "Proud of you 2 girls, such harmony in your work, a pleasure to watch you grow together." I didn't reply to any of it. I didn't cry either. Instead, I flipped to a clean page in my notebook. At the top, I wrote, "This isn't silence, this is theft." The page stayed open on my desk as I stepped out for air. I walked 3 blocks without noticing. When I finally looked up, I stopped cold. A billboard, Rowena's face, next to mine, below it, my quote, my name, and they spelled it wrong. Delara Whitlock. That was the part that finally cut, not the lie, not the fake smile, but the laziness in the theft. They didn't even care enough to spell my name right. I stared at the billboard until the lights blurred. I didn't storm out that night. I didn't scream. I just stopped pretending there was anything left to save. 2 days passed before I returned to the family estate. No one called. No one asked if I was okay. The silence wasn't new. It had just grown teeth. When I pulled up the driveway, the house looked exactly the same, too polished, like it had never been touched by tension, like the walls didn't remember the night they let my voice disappear. Alma opened the door. "They're waiting," she said, her eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. No hug, no question. Just a flat sentence in a house that used to know me. I stepped inside, and the scent hit me first. Lemon polish, coffee, and that lingering perfume she always used to wear. The furniture hadn't moved. The pillows were symmetrical. Everything was where it should be. Except me. I walked into the living room expecting voices. Instead, I saw posture. Sherwin sat at the head of the long dining table, suit jacket draped neatly over the back of his chair. Rowena was already seated, legs crossed, a notepad in front of her. No food, no drink, just optics. I took a breath. Who forged my name? No one flinched. I didn't sign that submission, I said, more slowly now. And you know it. Sherwin tilted his head. This isn't about betrayal, he said, like he was teaching a class. It's about optics. Rowena didn't look at me, just adjusted her pen. Alma stood at the far end of the room, arms folded. Her eyes never met mine. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, she whispered. I blinked. That was the moment something in me snapped, not loud, but final. The quiet kind of snap, like a rope slipping. They didn't want to fix it. They wanted it to blow over. Sherwin reached under the table and pulled out a photo, framed, glossy. The three of us on stage, Rowena smiling, me mid-step, Sherwin with the mic. He slid it toward me like it was a peace offering. This image, he said, speaks louder than any press release. Rowena added, No one wants a scandal, least of all you. I said nothing. They offered me a co-credit on future presentations, a role in their narrative, a patch on a sinking ship. I left the room. My feet carried me upstairs before I made a conscious decision. The hallway was dim, but I could find my old room with my eyes closed. It was still painted in those muted blues I chose when I was 13. The comforter was folded, the books untouched. It smelled like another life. I paced, trying to catch my breath. My eyes fell on the jewelry box near the window. The same box Alma gave me when I turned 16. I opened it without thinking. Inside, tucked under a broken chain, was an envelope. My name. Handwritten. The seal wasn't broken. I unfolded it slowly, careful not to rip the edges. It was dated 3 weeks ago, from the Tech Awards Committee. A personal note. Congratulations, Ms. Whitlock, it read. Your submission stood out in its clarity, originality, and solo vision. We were honored to recognize you as the lead and sole innovator. I froze. They had sent this. Someone had intercepted it. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my hands. I read it again. And again. They didn't just rewrite the public story. They'd buried the truth before I ever had a chance to hold it. I stared at the wall for a long time. Sometimes, Alma had once told me, not being mentioned is more painful than being insulted. Now I knew what she meant. This wasn't about the money, or even the name on the award. It was about being erased, deliberately, systematically, by the people who were supposed to protect you. I pulled out my phone, took a photo of the letter, sent it to my legal advisor. Subject line, proof, unopened. Then I opened my family group chat, deleted it. No message, no final words. Just gone. I placed the letter next to my bracelet on the desk. Own your voice. The engraving still there, faint but not faded. They buried the truth. Let's start digging. I unfolded the letter, and for the first time, I didn't just see my mother. I saw myself, decades later, if I stayed quiet. The morning after the family meeting, the house felt staged. Kitchen lights too soft. Counters wiped down like nothing had ever boiled over in that room. I came downstairs expecting a cold stare, or maybe one more thinly veiled lecture from Sherwin, but the only person there was Alma. She was already sitting at the table, mug in hand, eyes fixed on the back garden, the way people look when they're pretending not to hear the past creak through the floorboards. She didn't look up. Coffee? She asked, like we were strangers stuck at the same Airbnb. Sherwin and Rowena were gone. Of course they were. I made eggs, she added. If you want. I sat down. I didn't touch the plate. Neither did she. No mention of the letter. No mention of the silence that wrapped us up 2 nights before and still hadn't let go. She handed me her tablet wordlessly and pressed play. The title, Legacy of the Maxwells. Sherwin's voice filled the kitchen. It was a tribute video, slick, professional, funded, edited to perfection. His speeches, Rowena's TV moments, childhood clips edited together like they'd all been part of some glorious plan. There I was, one frame, blurry, playing in the background of a birthday party. I said nothing, just watched. Alma sipped her coffee. "You were in it," she said softly. "You were there." I blinked, then turned to her. "That's exactly the problem, Mom." She didn't respond, just turned the screen off and placed the tablet face down on the table between us. I asked what I'd been holding back for years. "Why didn't you ever speak up?" She paused, then reached into a kitchen drawer and pulled out a faded envelope. "I was offered a job once," she said, "lead designer at a firm in San Francisco, before you were born." I looked at her. "Why didn't you take it? Sherwin told me it would ruin the family, that it wasn't my role." She smiled, but not the kind you wear on purpose, the kind that leaks out of regret. "I stayed. I raised you girls. I made sure every presentation he gave looked sharp. I proofed his slide decks, ran the numbers on budgets. You know what I got?" Silence. I thought if I gave up enough, I'd earn a seat at the table. Turns out I was just setting it. I sat with that, let it sink past anger and into something colder. Because I realized I was already halfway there. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. My face probably did it for me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A direct message from an old intern I hadn't spoken to in years. "Just watched the tribute," it said. "Thought you founded the project." The sting wasn't from the question. It was from knowing they didn't even hesitate to rewrite the truth. I didn't reply. I forwarded the video to my attorney and typed 3 words in the subject line. "We begin here." Alma watched me from across the table. Didn't say a word until I closed the laptop. "It'll cost you," she said. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Not as much as silence already has." That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled every notebook I had out from storage, printed time-stamped emails, copied mock-ups, labeled sketches with red pen. I wasn't crafting a statement for the press. I was building a case, not for clout, for record, for history, for myself. I sat at my desk and placed the bracelet, "Own Your Voice," beside the stack of folders. I typed with the kind of clarity that doesn't come from peace, but from purpose. Delara Whitlock. Alone. No cosign, no footnote. Alma came in around midnight, just as I hit save. She didn't say anything at first, just placed a neatly folded napkin on the table next to my computer. I opened it. A job offer. San Francisco. Dated over 30 years ago. The one she never sent. I didn't hit send yet. But this time, silence wouldn't be the closing note. I booked the meeting through Vernell's assistant. No emotion, no explanation. Just a request for 30 minutes of his time. I told myself it wasn't a confrontation. I wanted a conversation. But by the time I sat across from him in that glass-walled office, I already knew what this would be. He glanced at my folder, barely flipped through the documents. No nods, no signs of surprise, just a steady, unreadable stare. "I advise the company," he finally said, folding his hands on the table. "Not the conflict." I leaned forward. "You know this isn't just a misunderstanding." He sighed. "Delara, this could burn every bridge you've ever stood on. Think about that." I thought about it. Every bridge I ever built had someone else's name carved into the arch. I thanked him and walked out. And somehow, that silence stung more than an outright betrayal. The sun was setting by the time I got home. I checked my mailbox on instinct, though I rarely got anything but junk anymore. Buried between catalogs and a credit card offer, there it was, a pale blue envelope, my name in Dr. Mixon's handwriting. Dated 3 weeks ago. I tore it open, standing in the hallway. His letter was brief, but it landed like a hand on my shoulder. "Delara," it read, "your submission stood alone in originality, clarity, and vision. It reminded me of your first prototype back in undergrad, when you built it alone, not for credit, but for truth. I told the awards committee as much. I reread the last line. They know it's yours. The postmark was dated the same day Sherwin submitted the forged documents. I sat on the floor and stared at it for what felt like a long time. And then I opened my laptop. Not to respond, not to post, just to see if I could still look at the work and not feel disgusted. I stared at the cursor blinking in a new document. Empty. Emails piled up. Missed calls. Press inquiries. A few from former clients now miraculously excited to work with me again. All of them felt like noise. I thought back to something Harlan once told me during a late-night coffee break in the lab. I was 19, barely holding myself together after a failed project. They'll try to steal your voice. Don't let them rent your silence. Back then, I didn't understand what that meant. I do now. For the first time, I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I was sharpening. The next afternoon, I passed by my old university's research wing on my way to a coffee shop. I hadn't stepped foot near it since I graduated. But something drew me in. Through the glass wall, I spotted a team meeting in session. Graduate students, engineers, a guest speaker, all talking over each other. Except one. A girl in the corner, younger, shoulders slightly hunched. Her lips moved once, then stopped. I recognized that hesitation, trying to speak without asking for permission to exist. I paused, watched her correct a line of code on the shared screen. No one noticed. As I walked by, I tapped on the glass. Startled, the speaker opened the door. "You've got an error in your loop," I said, nodding toward the display. She caught it. They looked confused. The girl's eyes widened. "Trust me," I said, and kept walking. She didn't say anything, but she looked at me like she'd remember that moment. I whispered to myself, how many times did I sit quietly so someone else could talk louder? Back home, I cleared space on my desk, created a folder on my encrypted drive. Proofs, not for deletion. Uploaded everything. Design drafts, patent sketches, timestamps, audio notes, even the napkin drawing from that afternoon I first sketched the neural link model. I didn't send it to anyone, but it was ready. Next to the laptop, I placed Harlan's letter and the bracelet. I wasn't going to shout, but I wasn't staying quiet anymore. I opened a blank email, addressed it to fbi.whistle@report.gov. The email was sent, the timestamp logged, and my breathing finally leveled. Not from peace, but from purpose. I didn't have long to feel steady. My phone rang less than an hour later. Sherwin's number. No warning, no courtesy. I picked up. "Delara," he said, tone smooth, rehearsed. "We need to talk." I didn't respond. "You don't know what to do with $10 million, he continued. "Let your sister handle it. She's built for this kind of pressure." Built? Like I wasn't? I stayed quiet, jaw locked. His voice sharpened slightly. "This is bigger than your ego, sweetheart." The call ended before I could say a word, and maybe that was a good thing, because what I would have said, it wouldn't have been quiet. I stood in the middle of my apartment, still holding the phone. Then I walked to my desk, opened my folder labeled Proofs, Not for Deletion, and started relabeling everything. Later that evening, I tried logging into the innovation server. Locked out. I refreshed, tried another link. Same result. I opened the camera feed to my lab. Black screen. No signal. I pulled out my office badge and looked at it. I hadn't used it in 2 days. Tried logging into my email. Suspended. I called it. Straight to voicemail. Every access point. Gone. Shut off. Like I'd never been there to begin with. I didn't yell. I said, under my breath, "They're not just stealing credit, they're stealing proof." I drafted one last email to Sherwin and Rowena. Subject line, "Stop this." I didn't expect a reply. What I got was worse. An auto response. "Thank you for contacting Odell Ventures. Family first." I stared at those 2 words, family first, like they'd crawled out of some grave they buried me in. Out of reflex, I called Alma. She answered. I told her what happened. Maybe 5 seconds of silence, then, "Maybe this is just a misunderstanding." That sentence landed harder than Sherwin's phone call. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I ended the call. Nobody was coming. That much was clear. I started packing, not out of fear, but strategy. I printed documents, stacked notebooks, made copies of external hard drives. I was done playing nice. I pulled open my fireproof box, placed my original drafts in a separate folder, and renamed the external drive. Legacy theft. Legal. I couldn't control how they saw me, but I could control what I left behind. As I worked, Sherwin's words echoed. You don't know what to do with 10 million. I looked up, out the window, then said to no one, maybe not, but I know what to do with the truth. Around 9, as I poured a glass of water and stood by the window, a text came in from a former colleague. I heard they're building a new AI division without you. I didn't even blink. They were repackaging my work. Again. I grabbed my old college notebook from the top shelf. Inside the back cover was a quote, Dr. Mixon wrote the day I graduated. You don't always get a second chance to protect your first work. I stared at that line for a long moment. Then I closed the notebook and picked up my bracelet. I hadn't worn it since the ceremony. I put it on. Tight. It didn't feel like jewelry anymore. It felt like armor. I sat down, opened a new browser window, typed slowly, fbi.whistle@report.gov, and this time I hit send. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew this was no longer just my fight. There was no reply from the FBI yet. No confirmation, no questions, just a timestamp and a quiet space in my inbox. Still, something in me settled the moment I pressed send. I printed out every document again, 3 sets, labeled them, dated them, tucked one into a drawer, one in the fireproof box, and one into a locked bag I hadn't touched since grad school. Around noon, a message came from a local journalist. Not long, just 5 words. They're prepping a counter-story. That figured. The internet had gone too still. No buzz, no chatter. When media stays quiet after a scandal brews, it's never silence. It's planning. The eye of the storm before they twist the narrative. I opened my notebook and wrote one line across the top of a fresh page. Truth isn't loud, but it doesn't blink. At 3:42 in the afternoon, someone knocked on my door. I opened it, and there stood Taurine Ledoux. He looked thinner than I remembered. No small talk, just held out a small black drive and said, I kept everything they deleted, from our joint logs. I stepped back and let him in. We didn't sit. He plugged the drive into my laptop and clicked open the folders, timestamps, audio files, clipped video feeds of my lab meetings, clear proof I led every test, every simulation, data logs with my initials, notes in my handwriting scanned and preserved, even drafts of emails I thought had been wiped. I mirrored everything, he said quietly. Backed it up the week they demoted me. I knew it was coming. I stared at him. Why didn't you come sooner? He hesitated. I thought maybe you were in on it, but when I saw your name left off the patents, his voice dropped. I couldn't watch them rewrite you. He left without taking a copy, didn't ask for anything, just nodded once before the door closed behind him. Later that evening, I was driving downtown when I saw it. A billboard lit up against the dusky sky, Rowena's face, another campaign, another lie. Rowena Klein, Woman of the Year. Below her image, a quote I wrote years ago in a journal, word for word, used without credit, and beneath both our names was the final insult, Delara Whitlock. They didn't even spell my name right. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and stared at it, the kind of stare that sinks teeth. Then I took a photo. No caption, just posted it online. Within 10 minutes, it was reposted by 4 tech accounts. Back home, I didn't eat. Just sat at my desk and opened every folder. I added Torrens files to the drive, then updated my timeline, mapping meetings, patent filings, media dates, and internal memos. The dots connected themselves. Then I drafted a clean legal claim. Nothing emotional, just facts, dates, roles, names. I created a package, partial screenshots, quote snippets, registered designs. Sent it, anonymously, to a journalist I trusted once, years ago. I wrote nothing dramatic, only, this isn't a leak, it's a reintroduction. That night, Alma brought me tea without speaking. She just sat beside me on the couch while the fire crackled low. We didn't look at each other, just listened to the silence, the kind that comes before everything breaks loose. I opened a folder on my laptop titled Public Timeline and saved a final version of the claim. File name, Whitlock v. Odell. Then I whispered to the screen, if they wanted a name war, they picked the wrong name to forget. I closed the laptop. My phone buzzed. One line lit up the screen. Urgent. Anonymous tip confirms patent theft at Odell Ventures. I closed the album, stood up, and walked toward the storm I didn't start, but was finally ready to end. The first crack came with a single line of text in my inbox. We've opened a case. No subject line, no signature, just that sentence from the whistleblower division at the FBI. And somehow, it was enough. I didn't smile, didn't flinch, just sat back and let that one line take its place beside the silence I'd been surrounded by for too long. Then came the blog. A niche tech outlet published an anonymous tip. The headline? Suppressed Genius. Is innovation being silenced at Odell Ventures? It was vague, on purpose. It didn't name names, but danced around the truth just enough for those who knew the players to see through the fog. The story talked about a family figurehead suppressing true inventors, unauthorized name usage, and internal whistleblowing. I didn't leak it, but it was my fingerprints all over that story. Sherwin's silence cracked first. Not to me, of course, but to the press, then Rowena's. Her voice was shakier than usual during the emergency press conference she scheduled. We are reviewing internal processes and have always supported innovation at every level of our organization. Sherwin, standing just behind her, nodded like a man watching a house burn from the inside and still saying, "It's under control." It was fascinating, in a bitter sort of way. Watching them try to pretend the ground under their feet hadn't just shifted. The comments on the live feed were the real story. Is Rowena even the real innovator? Who is Delara Whitlock? She's the one that wrote the original paper. I remember. I took screenshots of everything. Not for vanity, just documentation, just backup. That was my world now. Later that afternoon, my phone pinged. A friend from college sent me a photo. It showed a newly registered company, DW Strategic Systems. The CEO, Rowena. That name, DW, wasn't just random. That was the alias I used in undergrad competitions, a name I'd created so I could enter contests without anyone knowing I was Sherwin's daughter. It was the only thing that felt truly mine at the time. They hadn't just taken my name, they'd taken my shield. I pulled out an old journal and found the sketch, a crude but proud logo with DW inside a circuit grid. I placed the page next to my growing evidence folder. Then I opened my laptop. I didn't write a threat. I didn't write a takedown. I wrote a post titled, "The Truth Behind My Silence." No rage, no accusations, just facts, timeline entries, screenshots, patent dates, internal email headers, my role, their edits. A list of times I asked questions and got silence, and I posted it under my name. Full name, Delara Whitlock. The piece was live for 30 minutes before it started spreading. 4 outlets picked it up, then 6, then 12. I didn't check the notifications. I didn't need them. I'd said what I needed to say, loud enough but not screaming. I turned off my phone and made tea. That evening, Alma showed up. No warning, no apology in her eyes either. Just something closer to truth. She walked in quietly and placed a photo album on my kitchen table. Worn leather, dusty edges. "Look inside," she said. I opened to the first page. Tucked inside the sleeve was a clipping from a college newspaper, an article I hadn't seen in years, a profile piece about a tech competition I'd won. A picture of me holding a prototype in one hand, chalk-stained from working on the floor. I remembered that day, the light from the window, the silence that felt earned. Sherwin told me it was lost, said the file corrupted and couldn't be recovered. Alma watched me flip the page, said quietly, "You've always been the one doing the work." She sat down across from me, folded her hands, and added, "I'm sorry it took this for me to say it." I didn't cry. But something in my chest eased, just slightly. She reached out and rested her hand on mine. I never spoke up. You did. And that's why you win, no matter what they say. We sat like that for a long while. No music, no clock ticking loud enough to interrupt the quiet. Then, just as I began to think the night might end in rare stillness, my phone buzzed. One line on the lock screen. Formal response from Odell Ventures pending. Statement from Rowena in 1 hour. I didn't open it, not because I feared what was inside, but because I already knew what I'd say back. 3 days after I posted my story, the press had already begun naming names. Headlines weren't subtle anymore. Sherwin Odell had stepped down from Odell Ventures for personal and family health reasons. That was the phrase they used, wrapped in quotations like it had a job to do. No apology, no retraction, just a neatly packaged departure. Rowena never gave her public statement. The announcement came, the live stream window stayed blank, and the world filled the silence with its own commentary. And for once, they got most of it right. The interviews, the emails, the invitations, they came, all of them. But I didn't answer. I wasn't interested in being anyone's cover story for healing or redemption. I sat down at my desk that morning and began closing tabs, literal and emotional. One by one, an email from the interim board came in. They offered me an honorary advisory role. No power, no title, just a seat in the room I'd already outgrown. I replied with one line, "I'm not coming back to fix what you watched fall apart." Then I hit delete. No anger in that act, just a boundary. And for the first time, I realized my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Later that day, Alma left a small envelope at my door. No knock, no note, just the envelope. Inside, a scanned copy of one of my childhood sketches, the one Sherwin once passed off as Rowena's in a school art contest. Folded with it was a single line in Alma's handwriting. "I couldn't defend you then, but I won't be silent anymore." I tacked the sketch to my office wall. Not for nostalgia, not even for pride, but as a quiet reminder. Not everything lost stays buried. A few days later, we had lunch, me and Alma. It wasn't a healing session. No need for that. Just two women sharing bread, glancing at one another with mutual recognition, and the shared grief of knowing what it means to be edited out of your own life. That was enough. Rowena made one final attempt to save face. She posted a photo on Instagram, just a black square with the caption, "Sometimes your story gets told for you, sometimes it doesn't." Comments flooded in. "Apologize. Still waiting on the truth." This isn't accountability, it's poetry. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent a legal notice, not flashy, just a confirmation of sole intellectual property rights. It wasn't revenge, it was record-keeping. I never expected her to apologize. And that's the thing about closure. It doesn't need company. A week passed. I walked into my new co-working space, just a few blocks from where everything had started. It was small. A desk, a whiteboard, and a coffee machine that only half worked. But it was mine. I wore the bracelet again. Own Your Voice had dulled over time, but it still read the same. Still meant the same. A girl, barely in her 20s, knocked on my door mid-morning. "You the one who wrote that post?" I nodded. She hesitated. "It changed how I see my job." I smiled. And for the first time, I didn't step back or look away or mumble something about teamwork. I said, "Yeah, that was me." Later that evening, I logged out of my inbox, but one last email auto-loaded, an old draft stuck in the server. Subject: Family First. From Sherwin Odell.